Welcome to the deep dive.
Our goal is to, cut through the noise and understand what these numbers and sentiments mean for you, whether you're thinking of buying or maybe selling a home in Calgary right now.
Right?
So we'll be looking at the Calgary Real Estate Board's latest statistics and then layering in the perspectives from homeowner sentiment research.
Okay, let's unpack this. The Calgary Real Estate Board report, it starts by highlighting uncertainty weighing on the housing market, pointing to tariff threats as a factor impacting how confident consumers are feeling. It sounds like that initial uncertainty is setting the stage.
It does, yeah. And while that uncertainty seems to be having a direct effect on sales activity, we're seeing a 19% decrease in overall residential sales in Calgary compared to March of last year.
19%.
Okay. And what's particularly interesting, maybe for potential buyers, is that the apartment segment has seen an even more significant drop, like a 34% decline year over year.
Wow, 34%. That's a notable difference. So while sales are down overall, is that the whole picture or are there, other ways to look at this?
Yeah, that's where the perspective from Anne Marie Laurie, the chief economist at Calgary Real Estate Board, is really valuable. She points out that even with this decrease, the current sales figures are actually still higher than what we saw during the 2015 to 2020 period, which was, a more challenging time for the Calgary economy.
Yeah.
So while we're seeing a cooling from last year's pace, it's important to remember the broader context.
Okay, so buyer demand might be easing somewhat, but what about the number of homes available? What's happening with supply?
This is where things get really interesting, especially if you're a buyer. We've seen a substantial increase in the number of new homes listed for sale, a jump of 26.7% compared to last March. And this influx of new listings, it's led to a significant rise in the overall inventory of homes available, more than doubling with a 102.4% increase year over year.
Wow, that's a big shift. So after years where sellers seem to have all the leverage, are we moving towards a market that offers more opportunities for buyers?
Exactly. This surge in inventory has pushed the months of supply up to 2.39 months. For you as a potential buyer, this basically means there are more homes to choose from, and you likely have, well, a bit more time to make a decision compared to the really rapid pace we've seen.
Right.
It signals a move towards a more balanced market, definitely.
So it's becoming more balanced overall, but are there differences depending on, say, where you're looking or what kind of property you're interested in?
Absolutely. Yeah. While these are the general trends for the entire Calgary market, the Calgary Real Estate Board report emphasizes that conditions can vary quite a bit. Depends on the specific neighborhood, the price range you're considering, and the type of property: detached, apartment, row house, semi-detached.
Makes sense.
We're also seeing the sales to new listing ratio drop to 54%. This ratio is a key indicator. A ratio below 100% generally suggests that inventory will probably continue to grow, further solidifying that shift towards balance.
Okay. And what about prices? What's the overall picture there for both buyers and sellers?
Overall, benchmark prices have remained quite stable year over year, showing just a very slight increase of 0.8% to $592,500. Now, the benchmark price is, essentially a representative price for typical homes.
Right, the typical home.
But if we break it down, we see some different trends. Prices for detached and semi-detached homes have remained pretty consistent with their peak values and are still showing some upward movement. However, apartment and row-style homes, they're currently priced slightly below their peak levels from last year.
Okay, let's focus on detached homes for a moment, thinking about both buyers and sellers. What are the key things to know there?
Okay, if you're in the market for a detached home, sales were down by 9.84% in March compared to last year. But mirroring that overall trend, the number of new detached homes listed jumped significantly, 36.72%.
Big jump.
Yep, leading to a substantial 96.88% increase in the inventory of detached homes available. So this has pushed the months of supply for detached homes up to 2.13 months, which definitely offers more options for buyers compared to the, tighter market last year.
So more choices for buyers of detached homes, but does that apply across all price points? Is it the same everywhere?
This is a really important distinction for you as a buyer of a detached home. The data shows that the months of supply remain tight, like under 2 months, for properties priced below $700,000.
Okay, still competitive there.
Very much so. However, if you're looking at homes priced above $800,000, the market is leaning more towards balanced conditions. So your experience as a buyer will likely be quite different depending on your budget.
And for sellers of detached homes, what's their takeaway from all of this? What should they be thinking?
Well, despite the increase in inventory, the benchmark price for a detached home reached $769,800 in March. That's a 4.11% year-over-year
So
increase.
still going up then.
It suggests there's still underlying price support, likely due to continued demand in certain areas, particularly within the city center. So while the really rapid price growth probably moderated, sellers of detached homes, especially in desirable locations, are still seeing price appreciation.
Now let's switch to the apartment market. We heard about that significant drop in sales. What does this mean for buyers and sellers of apartments?
You're right, apartment sales saw the largest year-over-year decline among all property types at 33.58%. But as the Calgary Real Estate Board report points out, last year saw exceptionally high condo sales. So the current figures, they're still above the longer-term trends for the first quarter.
Ah, okay, context matters.
It does. We also saw a 10.3% increase in new apartment listings, which has contributed to a pretty substantial 98.61% rise in the number of apartments available for sale.
So a much wider selection for potential apartment buyers now, a lot more to look at.
Exactly. The months of supply for apartments have jumped to 3.17 months. That's the highest it's been since the end of 2022. This definitely gives apartment buyers more choices and potentially more room to negotiate.
What about prices?
On the price front, the benchmark price for apartments in March was $336,100. That's a 2.59% increase year over year. However, and this is key, this is still below the peak we saw last August.
The peak, okay.
And the report indicates that larger price declines have actually occurred in the north and northeast areas. So if you're a budget-conscious buyer, those areas might present, some interesting opportunities.
That's valuable info for anyone looking at apartments. Okay, what about semi-detached homes? What are the conditions like for buyers and sellers there?
For semi-detached, we're seeing a similar pattern. Slowing sales down 26.40% year over year, along with a notable increase in new listings, up 28.35%, and basically a doubling of the inventory, up 100.49%.
Wow, inventory doubling there too.
Yeah. So this has pushed the months of supply up to 2.24 months, suggesting a move towards more balanced conditions for this type of property as well. The benchmark price for semi-detached reached $691,900. That's a 5.12% year-over-year increase, with the biggest price gains reported in the city center and west districts.
And finally, let's consider row homes. What's the situation for those looking to buy or sell one of those?
Row home sales decreased by 10.51% year-over-year, but the number of new listings surged, up 30.04%. That led to a significant 130.08% increase in inventory. Big jump there.
Another big inventory jump.
Yep. The months of supply for row homes now stands at 2.07 months, indicating more balanced conditions, particularly for homes priced above, say, $500,000. While the benchmark price is $454,000, a 2.11% year-over-year increase, it's still below the peak from last June.
Below peak again. Interesting.
And interestingly, the Calgary Real Estate Board report highlights that the increase in supply has been most notable in the northeast, north, and southeast districts. That's useful info for buyers targeting those specific areas.
So across the board, whether you're interested in a detached house, an apartment, a semi-detached, or a row home, we're seeing this overall trend. Increased inventory, move towards balance. Now, let's factor in that homeowner sentiment research you mentioned. How are sellers and potential sellers in Calgary feeling about all of this?
Well, the research suggests a sort of cautiously optimistic sentiment among Calgary homeowners considering selling, especially those with properties in the lower to mid price range.
Okay, why optimistic there?
This optimism seems to be driven by continued strong buyer demand from first-time and move-up buyers. It's resulting in relatively quick sales in that segment. The sentiment research even points to a continued seller's market for affordable price points.
Right.
Plus, the expectation of maybe a 5% price increase in 2025 is a significant motivator for those currently looking to sell. They see prices still potentially rising.
But there's caution in there too, right? You said cautiously optimistic. Not everyone's feeling equally confident.
That's exactly. Owners of higher-end properties, they're expressing more caution. They're likely observing the longer time it's taking for these properties to sell and, the increased inventory in their segment. That's leading to more hesitation about putting their homes on the market.
Makes sense.
The research also highlights concerns about affordability, potentially impacting the overall pool of buyers. And there's an underlying uncertainty about, potential future market adjustments, particularly for those higher-priced homes. This seems to be creating a barrier for some sellers in that segment.
It sounds like homeowners are definitely picking up on this shift in the market we've been discussing from the stats.
They are, yeah. The research indicates an awareness of a potential market shift to buyers overall. And this might actually be prompting some sellers to make quicker decisions to list their properties now, perhaps before the market dynamics change further.
Trying to time it.
Maybe. We're also seeing that trend towards condominiums and townhouses in buyer preferences, which we touched on earlier with the stats, and the anticipation of maybe decreasing interest rates down the line. That's also viewed as something that could potentially boost buyer activity in the future.
Right. The interest rate question is always there. And are there any specific anxieties or worries coming through in this homeowner sentiment research? Anything keeping sellers up at night?
Yes. One emerging concern that's quite relevant for sellers is the worry of missing the market peak. They know property values have increased significantly, and there's a concern about whether now's the absolute right time to sell to maximize their returns.
That classic timing dilemma. So to wrap things up then, for both buyers and sellers, based on all of this information, the stats, the sentiment, what are the key things they should be keeping in mind right now in Calgary?
Okay, if you're a buyer in Calgary, the increased inventory across basically all property types provides you with more options and, frankly, a more balanced market compared to the intense competition of the recent past. That's the good news. However, it's really important to understand that market conditions still vary considerably depending on the type of property and your price range. Lower-priced, detached homes, for example, still seeing relatively strong competition.
Got it. And for sellers?
For sellers, especially those with more affordable properties, there continues to be solid demand. But there's also a growing awareness of a market that is, well, transitioning.
It's really interesting to see how these statistical trends from the Calgary Real Estate Board and then the feelings and expectations of homeowners and psychology almost are all connected, creating this really nuanced picture of the Calgary housing market right now.
Absolutely. The data gives us the hard facts on the ground, but understanding how people are feeling and responding to those facts adds such a critical layer of understanding, doesn't it?
It really does. So considering all of these factors, the economic uncertainties, those expectations around interest rates, and these local market shifts we're seeing specifically in Calgary, what specific strategies might both buyers and sellers be thinking about right now as they navigate this changing landscape? That's definitely something to consider. Thanks for this deep dive.
Real estate is about more than buying or selling your home. It's about paying real attention to your family's needs and providing real service. Call or text today